Welcome to our recap playthrough of Factions in order to get a grip on the land of Cantha in anticipation of the Guild Wars 2 expansion. Unfortunately, no longer monster drafting because I failed. I failed the challenge. What I'm doing now instead is I've thrown a bunch of Mesmers into my party as well as a Necro Healer with extra damage on Icy Veins and a Soul Twisting Writ, and pretty much I think these builds will carry me through the rest. Maybe we can play around with ours a little bit. I'm actually going to mess about with URL Weaklings for this one. But yeah, in general, the game shouldn't really be too much in the forefront as we go forwards, and I don't know, maybe I'll go back to the whole monster drafting when we get towards the end. I'll definitely make a video and talk to you guys about how the deck building and stuff goes. But anyway, so let's continue on with the story. The story so far is there has been a plague and a sickness that has taken us to the mainland. We have discovered that the long-lost Shiro Tagachi, the betrayer and assassin of the Emperor 200 years ago that caused this Jade Wind elemental catastrophe, he is behind this. How is that possible? Well, after he died, he was banished to an afterlife of servitude as an envoy of the mists. He was supposed to be a shepherd of the dead, but now he is shirking his duties and cheating. And so all the other envoys have decided that that is not cricket. They've brought us back to life. We died at the end of the last mission. And they're basically telling us, you guys need to sort Shiro out. So we actually end the previous mission, the Visitor Square, the quarantine zone of the city, here at the Dragon's Throat, which I think you Guild Wars 2 players will be interested in. Oh, the Dragon's Throat, what does that mean? Really, it is just a name, I think, that the Canthans, the people of Kaineng City, gave to this region. I don't actually see any real draconic influence here or whatnot. There are a few like dragon kind of tokens and things that you can see around, by the way. Like, if you look out on the docks, you can sometimes see like draconic looking lighthouses and stuff. But in general, there's not much explicitly Elder Dragon-y that I think the devs can tie into just yet. This area itself is actually the first example of a challenge mission. These were special missions that could, in theory, go on forever in many cases. They were basically score attack missions, another form of endgame, I suppose. This one takes place in the nasty, dank-ass sewers down below where you're meant to defeat multiple packets of Afflicted. What's actually kind of really funny is in the strategy guide that I've been supplementing the series with, they have weird information about this challenge mission, describing loads of mechanics that never came in the end, like there's I think they say there's like 13 rooms, and maybe that's true in the end, or like 9 rooms. Each room has a different like gameplay experience. Like in one of the rooms, the enemies you're fighting blink in and out of existence, is one of the things they were saying. In another one, there's a single boss who ends up spawning lots of allies. It ended up a lot more generic than that, really, in Guild Wars 1 as it eventually became a thing. But so as the story goes along now, you'll notice we've got a ton of henchmen. If I actually hit the recruit page, there are an awful lot of characters in this campaign. I do want to take a second to talk about that. We have all the Canthan characters, we have the returning Tyrian characters, we have city-exclusive characters, and then when we get to the Echovald Forest and the Jade Sea, we get like a whole host of characters from those areas as well. So when it comes to Guild Wars 2 and this expansion, the devs have got genuinely so much subject material, I doubt they'll get to it all. Will we get more backstory and talk about the descendants of Chio in the sequel? They easily could do that, or Jamai, or Emmy, or any of the headmasters. They could totally do it. I think really there are a couple that are important. These many Tyrian characters have already got lots of hints and, clues about them up in mainland Tyria. So I don't think they'll necessarily do much there, but definitely stuff on Menlo, some of the priority characters we met over in the monastery, I think so also. So let's continue on the story. You might think that we're going to go up to one of these missions up here now, but these are actually the end of the game. What we are at the moment is a really gross, really nasty area of the city that the game will actually end right next to, at the palace itself. Why we go to the palace, though, won't be clear just yet. Instead, what we're going to do is go south. Before we do, I just want to note to you guys this area here. It's not a mission. Kaineng Center. This is the capital outpost. They were called towns in the Guild Wars 1 nomenclature, where many players would really consider to be the heart of the city as far as Guild Wars 1 players were concerned. I think in Guild Wars 2 you are going to see definite references to this area. And as the devs have done with everywhere else, it's kind of like how, you know how Amnoon Oasis was a huge location in the Guild Wars 2 story for Path of Fire? This is kind of the equivalent of Amnoon Oasis. This area right here of the Megalopolis, right? Kaineng Center. And so there's not much more that I want to say. This is kind of, though, where the Jinlai seem to be based from. There's a cool Easter egg to do with the Jinlai. Whether we'll find this is intact or not depends very much on what the story they do in Guild Wars 2 is going to be. Is it going to be flooded because of the movements of the underwater Elder Dragon? As we see, say, Drokna's Forge is flooded in Guild Wars 2, not necessarily because of the Elder Dragon underwater, but still, or are they just going to have it still exist and feel somewhat similar? But yeah, lots of players would hang out here. There is the Asura Gate as well, which, by the way, the equivalent Asura Gate to this in the Nightfall campaign does exist in Guild Wars 2. If you play Living Worlds Season 4, Episode 1, when we go back to Istan, you can find the ruins of the Nightfall Asura Gate. So the only one that remains is this one down here in Cantha. I suppose they could do it in Guild Wars 2. Why not? Right, so let's continue on the story. The next mission is the Napui Quarter. Quite a lot of story happens between here. We essentially learn... Well, let me read you the description of the Napui Quarter first of all. Though it appears to be just another of Kaineng's numerous slum districts, the Napui Quarter is actually home to the adepts who serve Soon, the mysterious Oracle of the Mists. Within these slums, they study the words and teachings of the Oracle while protecting the downtrodden in secret. If you wish to become close to the stars, this is the place to begin. So we kind of get this idea that we want to ascend, we want to become closer to the stars to actually be able to interact with Shiro as an envoy and see him. It was very similar and reminiscent to what ArenaNet had done with the Masart story previously a year before in Prophecies. In Prophecies, you had this big bad enemy, but you couldn't see them or interact with them until you ascended at Augury Rock, and then you had the vision of the gods. And you could see, right? True Sight, I think is what they called it. This game kind of did something similar. It's like, oh, you got to ascend to be able to fight Shiro. Now, how do we do that? Well, coincidentally, by actually interacting with Soon, the Oracle of the Mists, who is the very character that decides who the envoys are. And there's kind of a real flaw in the faction story, or an interesting side, I suppose, to the faction story, which is that the idea of the Oracle of the Mists and what Wayno Su means and what the envoys are and how they were assigned and all that stuff, that's like big deal material, but the game is really hand-wavy about it. It gives you a little bit here early, and then you don't see or hear anything about it again until the final cutscene, where you see the character returns, and you're going to see what happens when we get to that video. So it's kind of always been an interesting place to me. You get these podiums that talk about the Celestials that the Canthans believe in and revere. Not quite gods, but like great entities worth reverence, somehow manifested in the stars. Let's speak to Adept Nai and he'll talk about it. He says, commune with the spirit realm and become Wayno Su, closer to the stars. This will restore the balance that exists in all of Cantha and allow you to communicate with the spirit realm where Shiro exists. So you'll see there's lots of like phrases here like spirit realm and stuff. Are we talking about the mists? Are we talking about a specific afterlife within the mists? It was already confusing as far as Guild Wars 1 was concerned, let alone how this now hooks into Guild Wars 2. Just realised I never had game audio on there. Sorry, I've just turned it on for you guys. So try to keep an open mind as we go through. Why am I here, we ask? Shiro is the reason behind the spreading plague in Cantha. We now know this. Your most recent encounter with Shiro sent you to a premature death, but the envoys intervened. They believe it is not your time to cross over to the mist yet. After speaking with the Celestial Ministry, Nika and an adept, a sign appeared from the Oracle in the form of a Celestial Kirin. So, here's the idea. We went to the ministry looking for advice. They didn't really offer us much. We helped the people at the city a little bit. We met a character named Nika. So, Nika is the descendant of a great assassin that had a hand in the defeat of Shiro 200 years ago. So, Shiro betrays the Emperor, assassinates him, the Jade Wind begins, and there are 3 characters that help to take out Shiro. There's a Luxon character, there's a Kurzik character, and there was a character from the city. The character from the city is an assassin named Vizu, and her long descendant is this person we met in the main story here, Nika. If you want to see more of Vizu, again, watch the CGI trailer, because she's in it. You get to see these 3 characters, the Kurzik, the Luxon, and Vizu, take out Shiro. And so anyway, we meet Nika, who is a kind of a prominent assassin of today. She's a member of a guild called the Obsidian Flame, by the way, who I'd like to see referenced in Guild Wars 2 somewhere. one of the maybe factions that's been referenced by the title of this campaign. As an adept, a sign appeared. We spoke to an adept, and then a celestial Kirin appeared to us, and we were sort of lured here. So why are we here? What's happening? You have come here to become Ueno Su, or closer to the stars. The ceremony will allow you to commune with the spirit realm as Shiro does. It is the first step to defeating him. So, what advice do you have on becoming closer to the stars? They'll give us some advice, which I can give you guys in commentary form in a second. But here's the cutscene about our entry here and who we met.
I wondered when I would be seeing you. My name is Sun. I am the Oracle of the Mists.
I was sent here to...
I know why you have come here. You are not the first to seek my help. You will not be the last.
What do I...
The stars in the night sky cast their light down upon the world, making physical replicas of themselves. Kai Jundon, the Kirin, the embodiment of corruption, the being of pure good, turned to pure evil. Quan Sang, the turtle dragon, the eternal paradox, not one thing or another. A reminder that we will never fully understand the mist.
Look like Lissa, really, I feel like.
Hai Shi, the phoenix, the representation of fiery eternity, awaiting those in the underworld. And finally, the mightiest of them all, Tomoo, the dragon, a constant reminder of atrocity, pain, and anguish. You must defeat the avatars of these 4 celestial bodies if you wish to become closer to the stars. Only then will you be able to see into the spirit realm and truly fight Shiro Tagachi.
But how do I...
Get to the avatars, step through one of these portals, and you shall be transported to the location you desire. Choose wisely. If you should perish while among the Celestials, I will not come help you.
I understand.
I doubt that.
One more question.
Bother me no more with this. Tangle with the stars if you must, but you will waste no more of my time.
I love that line. Bother me no more with this. What we're looking at here is some of the most abstract, confusing, like, Swiss cheese story and part of the world building. And when our character inquires to know more, we just have this curmudgeon tell us, bother me no more with this. I think it's kind of beautiful in a way. So, yes, the representation, the manifestation of the stars allows us somehow to commune with the mist. We're drawing some connection between the stars and the night sky and the mist, I suppose, which, of course, the devs have done to do with the Elder Dragons on several occasions. How this fits into the stories of 250 years from now, I'm not going to be able to give you a full analysis here. But one thing I would like to do is at least look at Tomoo. So, Tomoo is the Dragon Celestial. One of many, by the way. There are 4 represented in this mission, but as you may have seen as a Guild Wars 2 player, when you participate in the Dragon Festival, not the Dragon Festival, the Lunar New Year, I suppose, is what really shows more than anything else. There's a different Celestial for each year, like each, the real world equivalent is each animal of the Chinese New Year, right? And they actually have one of each. But we're looking at 4 in this mission. So here we have Tomoo. And I read all of these on the main original series that I did. I'll only go through this one here for now. The dragon, a reminder of atrocity, pain, and anguish. I love that description. Feels very Elder Dragon-y, really. And is that some suggestion as to what the Obviously, when this was initially written, the devs hadn't conceived of the idea of Elder Dragons. But now that we are in 2020 and there is the idea of the Elder Dragons, we're looking at how the devs will probably retrofit all this and make it actually a cohesive universe, okay? So as we read and consume this faction stuff, we must assume that the devs will forge a way that makes it all seem like the Canthans really knew about the Elder Dragons all along, right? Or whatever, okay? So, yes, I like this description. It sort of is some suggestion that maybe there are some lingering elements of the previous Elder Dragon cycle that have found their way into the minds of the Canthans many years later, even though they may not actually recognize it. By the way, another cool thing about this whole setting, frankly, is when you look at the Elder Dragons, so many of them are central to Tyria, and the game itself has never really dealt with that subject, with that question very well. It's something that becomes very apparent how weird it is when you're a super nerd and you look at the world map and you realize, hold on, Tyria is only a small area of the planet. The continent Tyria is only a small area of the planet Tyria. And yet all the Elder Dragons are around there. Zaitan's around there. Primordus has been around there. Jormag's around there. Kraukatoric's there. The Deep Sea Dragon, of course, could be swimming around anywhere, and maybe there's some cool ideas that it's in this region of the world. But, like, they all seem to be up at Tyria. My going theory and always thing I've loved to think about in terms of that is maybe they all went there because that's where the seers kept the bloodstones, right? The last magic that they could eat was generally in that area because that's where the seers were operating. That's where the bloodstones had been created, and then ultimately they fell asleep up there. That's why they're all in that little area, and that's why that's such an interesting place. Now, if we were to believe all of that, you got to think about Cantha. Like, how long ago was Cantha ravaged and abandoned by the Elder Dragons as they then just turned their attention up north? And there's all these other cool, weird questions on my mind as well. Like, how long would it take an Elder Dragon to move from Cantha to those other places? Do they do it willingly and comfortably? And the Deep Sea Dragon in particular, you know, what is the one thing that unifies all these locations? Water. Could they easily be at Lion's Arch one moment and Kaineng Center another? Will Guild Wars 2 go into that story? Anyway, so returning to this, we get this beautiful, like, Ori here, magical, floating, cool sound effect on it. Tomoo, so each of the Celestials, by the way, is equated to a character from the world. So they're not just like manifestations of the stars. They're not just to do with the connections of the mist. There's not all this mystical nonsense going on. But there's actually also a short story you get to read that kind of sums up who this character was. I think the idea is they were a person that then ascended to the stars and became Waynosu, and now they're represented as this celestial entity or something. Let's read. Tomoo was an empress, well known for her generosity and kind spirit. The people of her lands were all her children, and she made sure none went without food or shelter. When the Naga attacked, her private guards urged her to flee the city that she might save her own life, but Tomoo would not abandon her children. She called to her people to take up arms and defend themselves against the Naga, and she herself went into the streets to do battle. Unfortunately, the Naga overpowered Tomoo and her people, keeping her alive to witness the torture and murder of every single person in the city. Enraged beyond reason, she managed to break from her bonds and call down fire from the heavens, which streaked through the streets in the form of a dragon, incinerating the Naga attackers. So that's the story and the atrocity and pain and anguish that she felt at this horrendous thing. You get a little taste there as a Guild Wars 2 player, by the way, of how dark they could go in Guild Wars 1, especially in faction. Some of these stories are pretty grim, but especially you hear about how capricious and jealous and petty Balthazar the god was. One of the main short stories of backstory about Balthazar actually comes from this continent, in this region of the world, but that'll be the next episode when we're at this place called the Tanakai Temple, so I get ahead of myself. But yeah, so if you want more information about these and some other thoughts, obviously I do have the other series. Let's jump on in. This is the abridged one, after all. And let's complete the Napui Quarter mission, which should be pretty simple. I'll explain the mechanics and so on for you guys all now. So there's kind of two very different ways to tackle this mission, based on how confident you feel. Which I'll get into in a second. But yeah, basically we get the information at the start from Adept Nai. And feel free as these videos go along to read that text, by the way, guys. In the original series I did here, you might have to pause every now and then. But basically the main decision we make here at the start is how we want to enter this challenge. There are going to be 4 portals, and each will warp us to a different area of a mystical, strange city landscape that is near one of the bosses. So the ultimate goal, defeat all 4 bosses, but each portal we pick will take us out in a different area. You can see on my minimap here, I've got these green stars, a weird kind of element of the UI, frankly. and I need to get to all of them. Why your starting area is important, I guess they might be able to describe quite well in the strategy guide, to be honest. So I'll read this out. What the devs wrote about this mission in this guide is kind of hilarious because it's like a massive double-page spread with loads of information, and you might think, oh, that's because it's a really profound, brilliant mission. The truth is, it's just that they copy-pasted the exact lore that were on those podiums. I already gave you some of it about the Celestial Dragon. Well, they've got it written here about the other Celestials too, except the screenshots they took in the guide don't even look Celestial. They just look like the regular enemies. But hey, so here's what they say. Aside from all the copy-pasting. After suffering a defeat at the hand of Shiro Tagachi at the end of Mission 3, you were resurrected by the Envoys, who should have instead ferried your party to the afterlife. The Envoys are compelled to bring you and your noble group back to life at the price of further upsetting the balance of the universe. In order to restore balance, you must obtain the necessary celestial alignment with the cosmos to face Shiro. You must become enlightened by defeating 4 celestial beings. Listen to the way they describe this. It's really weird that like the universe being out of balance. Big bold words here. Out of alignment. And we need to find alignment with the cosmos. That's what we're doing here, guys. You begin the mission ringed by 4 one-way celestial portals arrayed around the room. Each one depicts the celestial creature you will fight when you walk through it. As you progress through the mission, you'll find your party overwhelmed with increasing numbers of powerful celestial beings. Then you have the option of defeating the celestials in any order you choose. Be warned, when defeated, they spawn celestial doppelgangers that you must also destroy to restore balance to the universe. Seriously, that's what they say. We're restoring balance to the universe here. So, here's the deal. And I actually think this is beautifully designed. Again, with a different kind of combat and gameplay scenario. This is so well made. We get to pick each of the bosses. Each boss has its own skill bar. We actually saw that I was drafting a couple of them. For example, the monk boss has a knockdown. When you kill the monk boss, it will spawn loads of mini versions of itself summoned from the stars all over these rooftops. And for the rest of the mission, you're going to be getting spammed with knockdowns. So here, it's these Kirin. I killed the Kirin boss first. And that's... So basically, because I picked the Kirin as the first thing to fight, my experience of this mission is dealing with knockdowns constantly. So I could equip my party with loads of knockdown resistant stuff if it was really big and relevant. And then I have the same decision to make for all of the other bosses around too. So Tomoo, the dragon, is a really powerful elementalist. If you kill that first, then it's easier to kill because it doesn't have many allies. But for the rest of the mission, you've got tons of Ellies to deal with. So which is easier, which is harder? And there is no like one real strat to solve this mission. It just kind of depends what you think a good route to go through would be. And obviously which portal you hit, and whether you go clockwise or counterclockwise are interesting decisions. One of the main big things you can do as well is you'll notice that, yes, there are all of the spawned Kirins after I defeated the Kirin boss, and there'll be increasingly more and more numbers of these star creatures. But there's also Tengu around. So as far as this Abridged series is concerned, these are the first Tengu you have seen. They'll be some of the only Tengu you see in the main story, even though Tengu are a big part of this setting. And what's funny is there's almost no information about this or why this is happening. I would love to see Guild Wars 2 talk about this. Because basically, we've got all this information now about this challenge that we're doing and becoming close to the stars. Why the hell are there varieties of Tengu here called Star Blades and Star Sentinels that are challenging us? It's like the Tengu are taking a role here that the Forgotten took in the Trials of Ascension in the Crystal Desert when you're trying to ascend via Augury Rock. It's like, are they in allegiance with Soon? Except that information is never described anywhere. I have no real doubt that the real reason these are here is because the devs felt like there needed to be some more enemies around in the mission, so they populated with some Tengu. But I'd like a real lore reason to go into this at some point as well. And Guild Wars 2 would be a great opportunity to do that, especially since so many of us are excited for Tengu storylines. As it stands, a lot of what you're looking at here is really surreal and really... I don't know whether we're meant to take more as a metaphorical experience. We're not meant to look at deeply with just the real texture of it. We're just meant to look at the feeling of it. I mean, where are we really? We're in the city, yes. But running along these rooftops with a strange, like, glowy, celestial, purple, starry sky, there's something fantastical and not right here. It's almost like, I almost feel like the idea is we've actually been drugged, and this is some kind of, like, internal dream sequence where our character is being, you know, tested by the Oracle of the Mists and nothing else. And it's just because this is a game, this is the manifestation of it as we experience it as players. It's a very strange mission. I genuinely would have made the argument for many years that this area of the city is not real. And it just happens in our head. Except for the fact that, of course, it is on the world map. And therefore associated with cartography tiles and stuff. And when they did the Winds of Change update many years down the line, I mean, look at this. Look at the sky here. When they did the Winds of Change update, you actually can return here. One of the last updates to Guild Wars 1 ever lets you come back here, not as a part of the mission, just as a regular part of the city. Which is very cool and very exciting and interesting and well worth, you know, being done from the studio. But it does mean that this is a very odd outlier of a mission. So yeah, my party's doing okay. Actually, a little bit worse than I thought it would do. I'll probably make some tweaks. My skill bar in particular, I don't have enough energy. This build, I thought because I have a lot of 5 energy cost spells and 2 signets, I'd be alright. The skill 8 Wastrel's Worry is really just to burn down bosses, so I'm not using it much. I have a really cool combo that I thought up before this video, which is basically you move like a dwarf, the skill 4 knocks them down, straight into Waste Not, Want Not, which is energy management for me, but only works if they're not doing anything, which of course they won't be doing anything because I've just used You Move Like a Dwarf. Also, You Move Like a Dwarf is instant activation, so I can use it while casting Energy Surge and all these other stuff. So I thought it'd be brilliant, but I'm just too low on energy. I need a bit more. I got rid of Air of Superiority in order to bring You Are All Weaklings. But maybe I'll bring Air of Superiority back. Air of Superiority for the Guild Wars 2 players is a skill that gives me energy as enemies die, essentially. It's an Ascension skill. Your weakness is cool, though. Weakness as a mechanic in Guild Wars 1 basically means that physical attacks, or like, I believe both ranged and melee, do 60% less damage, like way less damage. And it diminishes all of the attributes of the target by 1. Now, that's really cool if the build of the opponent is at a break point where they only have 9. So, for example, if they have a sword that they require level 9 sword mastery to be able to get the damage out of, if I inflict weakness on them and drop it to 8, I hit their damage by 60% and I knock them out of the break points. So now they do basically no damage with their sword. So I thought that would be pretty fun to play with, and that was really kind of what I was going for with this. But it's not that great against casters. It's just too much mana, frankly. And I kind of wish I had a couple more signets going on. In any case, I think that aside from, you know, some little niggles about my energy, the comp could probably do with a bit more, like, party-wide regeneration. Like, you'll see I can spike heal people, but when we get pressured down because we've all been AoE'd, like here, you know, we get a little bit of pulse heal up, but I'd like a bit more. I've also got a lot of Paragon skills that only really trigger when people get very low on health, and I'm just not seeing them proc much, so maybe I should ignore those as we go forwards. Anyway, so I'm almost done with the mission now. I actually kind of just lucked my way through this, recording this with you guys today. I don't have explicit memory of every route of all these missions in Guild Wars 1 anymore. It's been quite a few years since I properly sat down and did, you know, a attentive factions playthrough. I did one on Twitch a while ago, but I didn't pay too much attention. And here I just kind of winged it. And I remember this mission being very labyrinthine and very annoying. See, the creatures that spawn when you kill a boss infinitely respawn. The Tengu don't, and one viable strategy is to run through the whole map, kill the Tengu, clearing it all, and then kill the bosses afterwards. That's kind of the very slow, safe way that I was alluding to earlier. But if you do that, you've got these constantly respawning things to deal with if you ever get lost. And I assumed I'd have to struggle with that, but no, I just ended up lucking my way through. I wasn't looking at a wiki guide or anything. It's actually kind of baked into the design of this mission that getting lost and the respawns is something to struggle with. But that's design that I think is getting lost in the age of the internet. Video games, in particular, as you come out of the early 2000s, which Factions really was, I feel like I had a lot of growing pains coming to terms with the fact that everyone has access to the internet and they can just pull a map of the right route through. And they'll invalidate a lot of the stuff, or hidden items and missable items and all these kinds of things don't have much of a place in the world of internet-operated gaming these days. And you can kind of see little elements of that, I think, even in this mission, which, again, I do think still very well designed, just in terms of the choice of the bosses you fight and how hard the final boss fight will be. For this last fight coming up in a minute as well, what you can choose to do is just spike the main boss down. And as soon as he dies, even if you don't get all the other enemies in the area, it will trigger the final cutscene, you'll be okay. So if you are struggling and you want to go out on like a Hail Mary, you can just push everything possible onto that boss. Especially on a build like mine where I have Wastrel's Worry that I can just kind of spam and do lots of armor ignoring damage onto any boss creature. that sheds hexes fast, essentially. I could do that, but I think we're okay enough for now. Another little insight maybe for you guys. I'm sure I talked about this on my original series about this mission, but this was the first thing I ever saw of Cantha, ever. So, a little bit of history about me. In my family, in my house, was not the big Guild Wars fan. It was an older brother of mine that was really into this game. And I had been playing a little bit of Prophecies, but it was not me that got Cantha. It was him, Factions. It was him, and he'd been playing it. And I remembered coming home from school or whatever I'd been doing. I'd been out that day, and seeing him play. And this was my very first experience. And I saw this strange slum environment of a weird city that already is kind of strange to behold, right? Like, you sort of forget what you're looking at after a while, but we are in these quite surreal, strange landscapes, this like half well-rendered depiction of a city, which is hard enough to do as a game dev, right? As a studio, especially in the mid-2000s. And then layered on top of that, like, look at that sheer cliff on the left there, leading into a massive pit. There's weird stuff we're looking at here. And then on top of that, it was this particular mission with the weird purple-hewn starry sky and the celestial creatures. You know, when I knew of Guild Wars at this time, I would think of places like Yak's Bend and like Lion's Arch and the Great Northern Wall, you know, fantasy scenarios and landscapes that were quite natural to me. And then I saw this, I was like, what the hell is this? What is this new game that they've made? Is this the same thing at all? I almost would have willingly believed that this had nothing to do with mainland Tyria or anything I'd seen before. But that's just one of the ways in which they really pushed the scope for Factions and changed how the game and how the world felt. And I think they did such a good job. I'd like to see Guild Wars 2 do something similar. So here you go, this is the last one. I've gone with High G. Pretty cool story about High G, by the way, the Phoenix. And that's the mission complete, really. So this is how we ascend in Factions quite early. All that's left is a conversation with the very impressed Soon, the Oracle of the Mists.
I see that I have underestimated you.
I'll say.
Forgive my harshness. There are those who take the power of the stars for granted.
The Celestial Ministry, perhaps?
I see you have encountered them already.
Unfortunately.
The Ministry are nothing more than an overfed bunch of paper pushers, good for little other than playing parlor tricks at a Naga Cub's birthday party. Well, you'll understand then when I don't welcome all of those who come looking to become closer to the stars. Now you will excuse me. I have much work to do.
But
go talk to an adept.
And once again, he writes us off. I like that suggestion there that the Naga are sophisticated enough to have birthday parties. You know, it says a lot about their society. Also, it's really weird seeing Norgu and Gwen in the cutscene. I'm getting some, you know, Lord of the Rings 2 Towers on PlayStation 2 flashbacks, where you take characters totally out of sequence and throw them into the wrong storylines. So here's the first time we actually see Shiro in spirit form, I guess because we're close to the stars now.
Are you an envoy?
Yes.
Are you here to take us to eternal paradise?
You're not going to paradise.
What are you going to do with us?
I'm going to make you into my soldiers. You're going to fight for me.
We won't do it. You can't make us.
You will do whatever I tell you. Kneel. Bow before your new master.
And so there we see he's commanding the control of spirits. You might interpret that as to mean, oh, that's how he's making afflicted. That's why people are getting sick. That's not actually true. There's kind of a suggestion elsewhere in the game that the sickness is kind of almost just a consequence of where he's traveling and what he's doing. This thing where he's actually grabbing spirits and saying, you do my bidding, that is a specific, different thing that we're going to learn about very soon now. If you remember at the end of the last mission, in the previous video, we had a weird, mysterious boss at the end. I mean, I kind of deleted it in an instant, but there was a strange... the strategy guide described it as half afflicted, half golem, I believe. Well, we're going to learn a bit more about that and that thing with the souls. They're connected, so we'll see those there. So there you have it. We've become Waynosu. We get dumped out now at the Senji's Corner. This location was always notable to me as this was where you could start you could choose a different secondary profession to what you had before. I think in a previous video I suggested that you couldn't multi-class until you ascended. That's not the right phrasing of it. You could multi-class, it's just you couldn't freely swap your secondary profession until you ascended. And while Senji's Corner is kind of the equivalent there. Also, this skill vendor was one of the coolest skill vendors. They always had so many new abilities. I so often would want to build a new setup in Guild Wars 1 and I'd look and it'd be like, oh, you got to buy it at Senji's Corner. So shout out to a Kaineng there. But there you go. So that's it. That's this mission here. Then a pre-quarter. Some of the deeper mythology and storylines that I really hope to see Guild Wars 2 expand on as we go forwards. I will see you guys in the next part where we are off to the Tanakai Temple. If you've been watching some of my other Cantha coverage on the channel, you may have actually already caught me on a video over there. And soon we'll be out of the city and into the Echo Veld Forest and the Jade Sea. I'll see you guys for those very soon.